Let me tell you a story with a twist you'll never see coming. We'd been together for about 20 years. Two school kids, a mortgage, a shared loan, basically tied at the hip by marriage and mutual responsibility. Our little daughter was our pride and joy, and we both shared a love for gardening. My spouse made the best homemade preserves for winter. And believe it or not, that's where it all began. One hot summer afternoon, we were out in the garden when our neighbor Jacob dropped by for what he called a glass of tea. We'd always gotten along well. He had a ton of tools, just like me, so we helped each other out now and then. Recently, though, things had gone south for him. His wife left and took the kids. He was torn up about it, completely distraught. As good country neighbors, we tried to be there for him as much as we could. We invited him into the house, opened several bottles of whiskey, and started chatting. Naturally, the conversation turned to wives, as well as the situation with our neighbor. And then Jacob asked, "Why do you always have such delicious canned food, Stella? They have a perfect taste, spicy but not too sour, salty but just right, seasoned but not interrupting the taste. They are just fantastic." I glanced at my spouse, who blushed from the compliment, clearly pleased. She smiled and replied, "It's just my mom's recipe. No big secret. I can share it with you if you'd like." Suddenly, Jacob's expression darkened, and sadness washed over him. "No one to make preserves for me anymore," he said. "Nova used to handle that. But now, I don't even know what to do with all the produce. What am I supposed to do? Even if I had the recipe, I couldn't manage it on my own." Well, what can I say? I blurted out, without even thinking, "Darling, why don't you help me? Then you can treat us all later." And yeah, I said it myself. No one twisted my arm. Off she went to help him. And there I was, all proud of myself, thinking how neighborly we were being. I even thought, hey, this will cheer poor Jacob up. Fast forward a bit. One day I ran out of oil for a chainsaw. Naturally, I decided to drop by Jacob's and borrow some. I knocked without waiting for an answer. Why would I? We are neighbors, but just walked in. Now, looking back, let me tell you that I really should have waited for someone to open the door. What greeted me was, well, I wasn't ready for such a sight. There among the empty jars, bowls with cucumbers, tomatoes, and brine, stood my beloved wife and our dear neighbor. And no, they didn't cook canned food. I rubbed my eyes, hoping it was some kind of weird waking dream. I warn you, spoiler alert, it wasn't a dream. I caught them in the midst of, a very practical moment. I was furious. The rage just pierced my brain. I rushed inside, grabbed the first thing I saw, a bucket of tomatoes or something, and rushed at Jacob. And can you imagine, he had the audacity to defend himself. Imagine this scene. But here's the kicker. It doesn't end there. Oh no. Things went from tragic to just plain ridiculous. Two of our neighbors came running over, hearing the commotion. Now we all know each other, since our plots are close. One's a middle-aged bachelor, and the other, pushing 50, is married with kids. So yeah, things escalated pretty quickly. So there we were, me and this scumbag going at it, fists flying. My wife's off to the side, bawling her eyes out, probably scrambling to come up with some excuse that might make sense. Then, out of nowhere, these two women burst in, screeching and rushing over like they're there to save the day. And guess who they're trying to protect? Yup, him. They're both shouting things like, "Don't you dare touch our man." Can you imagine that? But oh, it didn't take long. When they realized that their so-called man had become attached to my wife, and not just to them, they quickly switched sides. Suddenly, I received reinforcements. In the end, the neighbor ran away and disappeared into the woods, scared by the whole scene, which was watched by half the village. I swear, when that fool dashed like a scared deer down the main road toward the forest, I should have been crying. But instead, I couldn't stop laughing. It was just too absurd. It turns out that half of the village had their own stories related to this comforter. He walked around each of them, singing his sad song about being lonely with a broken heart. The fact is that he didn't seem too picky. He didn't have any preferences at all when it came to who he was comforting. After that day, he vanished. Never saw him again. I ended up selling the cottage, tomatoes and all. The very same ones I had been so worried about. The women in the village now look at each other with suspicion, eyeing one another like rivals. As for my wife, there was no going back. I couldn't understand her, let alone forgive her. We got divorced, and all the fallout that comes with it followed. That's my little tomato cucumber tale for you.